the point is that the war had already ended, essentially, by the time Petraeus took over in Baghdad in February 2007. The victory had already been won by the Shia over the Sunnis, and so basically the violence continued for a few months, but essentially the point had already been made to the Sunnis, and the Shia didn't intend, obviously, to continue this indefinitely. They had basically made their point.
Well, and Petraeus never followed through with his deal with the Sunnis that, don't worry, I'm going to make sure you're integrated into the Iraqi army and into the government and et cetera. He's just left them high and dry. Now they're all going back to the suicide bombers.
Well, of course, Petraeus never had the power to make that stick. I mean, he may have told them that we're going to integrate you into the Iraqi military, but it was really always going to be up to the al-Maliki regime to carry out such a policy. And al-Maliki made it clear from the beginning, and this is very well documented, that he was very wary about this whole policy and was making no commitments beyond very minimal integration of the Sons of Iraq into the security structure of Iraq. So Petraeus had no ability to promise that sort of integration to the Sunnis.
Yeah, well, you're just mad because we created a great democracy there, and you said it would never work.
Well, so that leaves the third major claim by Petraeus and the defenders of the surge myth, which is that he and his counterinsurgency strategy, with the able assistance, of course, of General McChrystal and his Special Operations Forces units, carried out a ruthless war against the special groups funded, trained, and commanded essentially by Iran, organized and commanded by Iran, making it possible to essentially reduce the Shia violence, the militia violence, and thus bring us to this situation of relative calm in Iraq. Now, the truth is, this is a very complex question. There's so many elements to it, but I always begin with the point that the whole idea of special groups, that term itself, was created by Petraeus' command in order to carry out Psy-War, a Psy-War objective with regard to the Muqtada al-Sadr Mahdi army, which was to try to divide it, to try to bring as many commanders in particular of the Mahdi army over to the U.S. side to cooperate with the United States. And by basically saying that we're going to go after those people who continue the resistance by calling them special groups, that was considered to be a way to do that. By the way, it was an unqualified failure because there's, as far as I know, no units actually volunteered to come over and cooperate with the U.S. side. But that was the purpose of it. And
it's important to note, too, that they always, when they differentiated between these fictions, or the one truth and the fiction, the special groups, they always said, yeah, the special groups, the reason they're still at war against us is because they're backed by Iran.
Right, exactly. That was the myth that was foisted upon the news media, and they lapped it up. I mean, it was really something that dominated news coverage for many months in the Petraeus era.
Well, and I might as well throw in here, we don't have time for you to do a whole comment on this, but I interviewed you over and over again through 2007 and 8 even, and Phil Giraldi and many other people have done work on this 8 Ways from Sunday about the propaganda that the only reason that the IEDs evolved into the more effective EFPs with a molten copper core was because those were all coming from Iran, and yet that was completely debunked over and over and over again. Those bombs were being made in Iraq by Iraqis. They never provided a shred of evidence that those bombs were coming from Iran. Just Google EFP and Gareth Porter, and you can read all about it. But anyway, back to your article and your next point, sir.
Sure. The several other points can be made about this, but I don't know how much time we have.
Plenty.
The key point that I would make about the EFPs is that this is a technology that the Iranians did not specialize in. It was Hezbollah. Hezbollah was the one that really were the specialists in making and using EFPs. They were the ones who taught the Mahdi army how to do it. They were the ones who trained them in making them as well as how to use them. The Iranians provided financial support, no question about that. to the Mahdi army. But let's face it. I mean, any weapon system that you want to buy can be purchased in Iraq, on the border between Iran and Iraq. There are huge arms bazaars that have everything you want, and obviously complex networks to buy this stuff. And that's exactly, I mean, all the evidence points to that being the modus operandi of all the insurgent groups in Iraq.
Well, now, and on the Muqtada al-Sadr Iran thing, I think this is so important it can't be overstated. This was the one Shiite leader with real grassroots support, and he was not a traitor. Like the Supreme Islamic Council all fled to Iran when Saddam invaded Iran. They took Iran's side. And
absolutely, yeah, that's right.
And Sadr was a nationalist. He routinely denounced Abdulaziz al-Hakim's plan, Biden's plan, to divide the country. Yeah. And the only reason he's in Tehran now is because the Americans drove him to Tehran.
Right, and I think the point that needs to be understood alongside that, to really sort of unravel the entire mythical structure of the Iraq War, is the fact that the al-Maliki government, first of all, 2 points about the al-Maliki government. First of all, al-Maliki was chosen in a secret meeting of the Shia leadership of all the Shia factions, that is Dawa, Iski or Siri, and the Sadrists. And it was presided over by none other than General Soleimani, the head of the Quds force, which deals with Iraq. He was the day-to-day officer in charge of Iraq policy for Iran. So he was snuck into the green zone without the knowledge of the United States by the Shia leadership and presided over a meeting which then, in April of 2006, chose al-Maliki to be the next prime minister of Iraq. And he immediately, of course, began what had already been started under his predecessor, al-Jafari, to collaborate very closely with the Iranians on a whole series of matters, including, not the least of which, was a plan to get the United States to agree to a timetable for withdrawal. Now, the second point that I want to make about the al-Maliki government is that it was a coalition involving all three Shia groups. It was the Sadrists, the Siri folks, and Dawa. And the Mahdi army was extremely important to al-Maliki and the Shia during 2006 precisely because of the Battle of Baghdad that was going on. They depended on the Mahdi army to carry out the ethnic cleansing of Baghdad and to bring about the victory over the Sunnis. That was terribly important. Everybody agreed upon it. Iran agreed upon it. All three Shia factions agreed upon it. And so they had no problem with Iran's support for the Sadrists during that period. They were all for it. It was all part of the deal. And then when the Sunnis were obviously defeated, all of the old sort of vindictiveness among the Shia factions, particularly between the Sadrists and al-Hakim's Siri, came back to the fore, and that's when the other two Shia factions, the Dawa Party and the Siri, turned violently against the Sadrists and basically cooperated with the United States in trying to suppress the Sadrist forces. And that's, of course, where you get Petraeus claiming this huge victory. What he doesn't talk about is the fact that before that, of course, they were all on the same side. The Iranians, the Americans, all the Shia factions were on the same side, fighting the Sunnis. And again, they were on the same side except for the Sadrists in 2007. Everybody, the Iranians and the other two factions were against the Sadrists along with the United States. And the United States and al-Maliki government were both publicly welcoming the Iranian help in basically putting pressure on the Sadrists to declare a unilateral ceasefire to Sadr himself.
So, long story short, what you're saying is America lost the Iraq war. They installed a bunch of goons who don't need them. They'll just enslave the people of Iraq themselves without our help, and now they're kicking our asses out, and 1 million people, Gareth, died for nothing. Is that what you're telling me? For nothing at all? We don't even get to steal the country and keep it?
That's exactly what I'm telling you.
And see, this is the thing that's really got the chip on my shoulder this week is I'm sure you saw or heard the Fox poll where the American people by 60-something% say congratulations to us for killing Iraq. Yep. And, the thing is, I grew up hearing Korea referred to as the forgotten war or whatever, and I see how desperately people just want to pretend the Iraq war never happened or that it was just all George Bush's fault or something. But, that book, Collateral Damage, by Chris Hedges, about American soldiers going around Iraq and just waxing families off the face of the earth on a daily basis, committing atrocities that they can't stand. They kill themselves over the memories of the atrocities that they committed there. But our whole country gets to just pretend this never happened, gets to pretend that maybe as many as 100,000 people died. And the most horrible thing to happen to that piece of earth since Genghis Khan and the Golden Horde came and buried their irrigation and salted their fields. I mean, no, that ain't fair, man. It ain't right. God damn it.
This is a sign of a very sick society, obviously, and there's no way that the United States as a nation, as a society, is not going to pay very, very heavily, not just in terms of dollars, but in terms of its very social fabric and its soul. I mean, there's no question about that.
Yeah, you look into the abyss, it looks into you. And, I always think of the Thomas Jefferson quote. He's talking about, I guess, the Missouri Compromise, I think. And he says, it was like a fire bell in the night, and I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, and his justice cannot sleep forever.
One of the great quotes of all time, no question about it, about the United States.
Yeah. All right. Well, man, thank you again, Gareth. I rely on you so much, and for obvious good reason.
Well, thank you for your support for all the work that I've done. And my only problem, my only concern with you, Scott, is that I'm afraid that you're not really telling us how you really feel about this.
Well, I'm working on trying to become a little bit more honest, Well,
I think you've probably conquered that problem if you ever had it.
Thank you very much,
All
sir.
right.
Appreciate it. That, everybody, was Gareth the Great. You can find him at ipsnews.net and at original.antiwar.com/Porter.